The Practice of Public Relations, 13th edition, Chapter 3, Communication. Call me Caitlin. Bruce Jenner is Caitlyn Jenner, transgender woman. He announced his new identity with a Vanity Fair cover story. This attracted 1 million Twitter followers in 4 hours and 3 minutes. This cover story drew more than 1.1 million followers hours after it went online, and 6 million people had viewed the story by the end of the day. She broke the record previously held by Barack Obama for fastest person on Twitter to reach the 1 million follower milestone. The Vanity Fair article and Twitter account were part of Ms. Jenner's carefully orchestrated public relations campaign. The editor of Graydon Carter said, "All stories are part of some coordinated rollout, all stories everywhere." Communications must be handled with great care. The internet and social media ties people around the world together as never before. Communications about everything are meticulously calibrated to achieve maximum impact. The world has become a global village. Communication has never been a more potent tool. So many people these days receive all their news from the internet and especially see headlines on social media, Twitter and Facebook, and it's become really the main source of information for so much of the world. Public relations practitioner equals professional communicator. Public relations people have several functions, including exchanging of information, imparting ideas, making oneself understood by others, and understanding others in return. These are all key elements of a good communicator. The goals of communication are to inform, to persuade, to motivate, and to build a mutual understanding. Communication can't be just one way. Communication, in its proper form, is a two-way street. Traditional theories of communication. Traditional theories of communication include the two-step flow theory and the concentric circle theory. The two-step flow theory states that an organization would beam a message first to the mass media, which would then deliver that message to the great mass of readers, listeners, and viewers for their response. Today's media is less mass than it is targeted, but mass media may still influence people. Concentric circle theory assumed that ideas evolve gradually to the public at large, moving in concentric circles from great thinkers to great disciplines to great disseminators to the politically active to the politically inert. The overall study of how communication is used for direction and control is called cybernetics. Traditional theories of communication continued. Pat Jackson's 5-step process: building awareness, developing a latent readiness, triggering event, intermediate behavior, and behavioral change. The late Pat Jackson's public relations communications models emphasized systematic investigation, setting clear strategic goals and identifying key stakeholders. One communications approach to stimulate behaviors change encompassed a 5-step process. Building awareness was meant to be through standard communications mechanisms. Developing latent readiness is where people form an opinion based on knowledge, emotion, intuition, memory, and relationships. A triggering event is something either natural or planned that makes you want to change your behavior. The intermediate behavior, or an investigative period, is when an individual is determining how best to apply a desired behavior. Information about process and substance is sought. Behavioral change, the last step, is the adoption of the new behavior. Traditional theories of communication continued. SEMDR, source, encoding, message, decoding, receiver. Confirmation bias, spiral of silence. SEMDR communications process suggests that the communications process begins with the source, S, who issues a message, M, to a receiver, R, who decides what action to take, if any, relative to the communications. In the encoding stage E, the source's original message is translated and conveyed to the receiver. In the decoding stage D, the receiver interprets the encoded message and takes action. Confirmation bias suggests people seek out messages that agree or confirm their own attitudes. They avoid messages that disagree or are dishonest with their own attitudes. Silent theories of communication may suggest that the silent majority fears becoming isolated, so they vote with the majority. Elizabeth Noel Newman's spiral of silence suggests that communications that work well depend on the silence and non-participation of a huge majority. Contemporary theories of communication. These include constructivism and coordinated management of meaning. Everett Rogers talks about the unprecedented diffusion of the internet as a communications vehicle that spans cultures and geographies, while others point to the convergence of video, data, voice, mobile, and fixed, traditional and new age communications mechanisms. Constructivism suggests that knowledge is constructed, not transmitted. Constructivism, therefore, is concerned with the cognitive process that precedes the actual communication within a given situation, rather than the communication itself. The theory suggests it is important to have knowledge of the receiver and his or her beliefs, predictions, and background. The goal is not to get receivers to believe or act on dispensed information. It is to identify how receivers think and work to challenge preconceived notions and hopefully convert audience members to alter their views. The coordinated management of meaning is a theory of communications based on social interaction. It posits that when we communicate, we construct our own social realities of what is going on and what kind of action is appropriate. Rather than being the simple transmission of ideas, communication is a complex, interconnected series of events with each participant affected by the other. Grunig-Hunt public relations models. These include press agentry, publicity, public information, two-way asymmetric, and two-way symmetric. Press agentry publicity is essentially one-way communications that beams messages from a source to a receiver with the express intention of winning favorable media attention. Public information is another early form of one-way communication designed to inform. It and press agentry model have been linked to public relations as propaganda. Two-way asymmetric is a more sophisticated two-way communication approach. It allows an organization to put out its information and receive feedback from its publics. An organization could alter its responses to more effectively persuade publics based on feedback. Two-way symmetric is the preferred way of communicating. It advocates free and equal information, a flow between an organization and its publics based on mutual understanding. The approach is more balanced, symmetrical, and with public relations communicator serving as mediator between the organization and the publics. Irate actor takes to the air. Alec Baldwin was thrown off a flight for refusing to heed flight attendant requests to turn off his phone. Baldwin tweeted about the interaction, and American Airlines posted a response on Facebook. How would you assess the fairness of Baldwin's response to Americans' action and the airline's response to Baldwin's tweet? Did American Airlines do the right thing? What other options did the airline have? Learning Objective 3.1 discussion question. Why is it important that public relations professionals understand communication? Well, it's pretty much the backbone of the public relations profession. Learning Objective 3.2 to explore the importance and proper use of words and semantics to deliver ideas and persuade others toward one's point of view. The word. Words are personal and potent weapons. Words are perpetually changing. Discriminatory language is particularly sensitive. Understanding semantics is important. Encoding the client's message, public relations interpreter. Words can soothe us, bother us, or irritate us. They can bring us together or drive us apart. Words mean different things to different people. They are perpetually changing in our language. Words that connote offensive meanings or discriminatory language is particularly sensitive. Without knowledge of the territory, the semantics of words may make no sense. Words have a significant influence on the message conveyed to the ultimate receiver. The responsibility of a public relations professional entrusted with encoding a client's message is very significant. The message. The content is the message. This is the most popular theory. Meaning of the article or intent of the speech is most important, and the medium and communicator are less important than the content. The content of a communication, what it says, constitutes its message. According to this view, the real importance of a communication, the message, lies in the meaning of an article or in the intent of a speech. Neither the medium through which the message is being communicated nor the individual doing the communicating is as important as the content. This is one theory. The message continued. The medium is the message. Content is less important than the medium in which the message is carried. This is a theory from Marshall McLuhan, relevant today because reputation and integrity of media sources can vary wildly. Personal bias is brought to bear in assessing power and believability of messages. Some theorists argue that the content of the communication may be less important than the medium in which the message is carried. The hyper-media society creates opportunities to differentiate between sources based on integrity and credibility. The message continued. The person is the message. The speaker can persuade regardless of the message or medium. Charisma may play a part in persuasion. I think it definitely plays a part in persuasion. Speaker's words, body, eyes, attitude, timing, wit, presence all form a composite that influences the listener. If a man thinks he can persuade, he can persuade. This is a long-standing attitude within the communications field. Today, we often refer to a leader's charisma, which may be more important than what the individual says. Orators can move an audience by the inflection of their words. The speaker's words, face, body, eyes, attitude, timing, wit, presence form a composite that works together to influence the listener. I think this was really true with Oprah's speech at the Golden Globes recently, which was so influential. I read it in text form, and it wasn't nearly as inspirational as it was in spoken word. I think she was just a master at delivering the message. Profizzle of Lexissizzle. This is a headline that comes from the publisher, not me. I did not make that up. Rapper Snoop Dogg created a lexicon of Izzle speak. How does the changing meaning of words affect a public relations professional's ability to interpret messages to key publics? Learning Objective 3.3, to discuss the various elements that affect communication, including the media, the bias of receivers, and the individuals or entities delivering messages. Receiver's bias. Message decoding depends on the person's perception. Key to feedback is understanding the precognitions that receivers bring to a particular message. How an individual comprehends a message is key to effective communications. Everyone is biased, and no two people perceive a message identically. So it's important to understand the bias or biases that a particular receiver might already have. Receiver's bias, stereotypes. Most people are victims of stereotypes, and stereotypes influence communication. An example would be that a person wearing glasses is more believable or more intelligent. Receiver's bias, symbols. Symbols leave distinct impressions on most people. Symbols can be very persuasive if used properly. Persuasion can be positive or negative. Receiver's bias, semantics. Use words effectively to communicate desired meanings. Same words hold contrasting meanings for different people. Language and the meaning of words change constantly. Consider the consequences of words before you plan on using them. Public relations professionals make a living knowing how to use words effectively and communicating desired messages. The same words may hold contrasting meanings for different people. Good communicators recognize that the meanings of words change constantly, and they consider the consequences of the words they plan to use before using them. Receiver's bias, peer groups. Peer pressure influences the way messages are perceived. Peer groups influence attitudes and actions. Peer pressure prevails in terms of influencing personal bias. Public relations professionals intent on framing persuasive communications messages must understand the importance of peer group influences on attitudes and actions. Receivers bias media. Media is a powerful agenda setter. Traditional media may have lost some clout due to social media, the internet, cable news, and talk radio. That's definitely true. There used to be gatekeepers, and the gatekeepers were the traditional news media, and public relations professionals had to go through them to get their message out. But with the media, with social media and the internet, that's much less the case. The New York Times, the Washington Post, and USA Today are still usually the most powerful for setting agendas, though. And public relations professionals have a direct role for setting the agenda for others. Agenda setting is the creation of public awareness by the media, the ability to tell those who are consuming the media what issues are important. The press and the media do not reflect reality. They filter and shape it. Media concentration on a few issues and subjects leads the public to perceive those issues are the most important, more important than other issues. If public relations professionals try to interest the media in a client-oriented story, they may have a direct role in setting the agenda for others. People base perceptions on what they read or hear, and often without bothering to dig further to elicit the facts. Hopefully that's changing in today's world, but it's still very largely true. Learning Objective 3.3 Discussion Question. What is meant by the media as agenda setter? This is a discussion question on our discussion boards. Learning Objective 3.4 To examine the necessity of feedback in evaluating communication and formulating continued communication. Feedback. You're not really communicating unless someone on the other end is able to hear and understand what you're saying and react to it. So a communicator must get feedback from the receiver, know what messages are or are not getting through, and know how to structure future communications. Feedback. Effective communication doesn't take place if the message doesn't reach the intended receivers or the message doesn't exert the desired effect on the receivers. This situation is like the old mystery of the falling tree in the forest. Does it make noise when it hits the ground if no one's there to hear it? Regardless of the answer, effective communication doesn't take place if a message doesn't reach the intended receivers or exert the desired effect on those receivers. Even if a communication is understood clearly, there is no guarantee that the motivated action will be the desired one. In fact, a message may trigger several different effects. It may change attitudes. It may crystallize attitudes, which is more common than attitude change. And it may create a wedge of doubt or a modified point of view, or it may do nothing and have no effect. Learning Objective 3.4 Discussion Question. Why is feedback critical to the communications process? Case study. Race relations with that soy latte. What would you have counseled CEO Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, on his idea to keep Starbucks locations free of guns? The Starbucks CEO, Howard Schultz, had high hopes for the company's ill-fated Race Together campaign in 2015. It was a time when several police shootings had occurred, and there were a lot of tensions between minorities and police, among others. So he felt that being a large for-profit company, that they should do something to create an atmosphere where a dialogue could be started on race relations. It was not received well by the public at all, and also not received well at the company's annual meeting that year. So what would you counsel him on his idea to start conversations among baristas, and patrons on the subject of race, and whether that's the right platform for beginning these discussions, or if people just want to go in and get a cup of coffee? Is it a good idea for companies to communicate publicly about their viewpoints? And if so, should there be any public relations restrictions on the issues companies take on? And what other public relations options did Schultz have in his quest to bring Starbucks into the race issue? These are just questions for you to contemplate. An interview with Denise Hill, distinguished faculty member in the School of Communications at Elon University. She has 30 years of agency and corporate communications experience. She held a variety of senior level communications positions throughout her career. So with Denise Hill's perspective, we learn that communications is the essence of what we do in public relations, whether it is through writing, speaking, and or using visuals. Public relations professionals help facilitate a two-way communication between organizations and their publics. And the single biggest problem in communications is the illusion that it has taken place. So in other words, you may think you're communicating, but you're not doing it effectively. So that's something that communications professionals need to be cognizant of and make sure that they're actually communicating to their publics effectively. How essential is communications in public relations? Clearly, it's very essential. It's the essence of what we do. Without it, there is no public relations. And it's essential to ensure clear messages are delivered via channels that resonate with audiences. You may be communicating, but if it's not on the right channels, your audience is not receiving the messages. And the messages may be received but not understood. So it's very essential to make sure that you're speaking in a language and with words and concepts that your audience understands. Public relations professionals must be able to create clear written and spoken messages, listen, analyze, adapt, influence, persuade, and counsel. It's very essential that communications professionals effectively use the written and spoken word, create clear and I would say concise written messages. The shorter the better. Have strong verbal communication skills, good listening and nonverbal communication skills, ability to assess internal and external environment and adapt, and exert strong influence, persuasion, and counseling skills. The two-step flow theory highlights the importance of opinion leaders in audience decision-making. Public relations professionals often identify opinion leaders as an important audience and rely on them to help reach other audiences. Agenda-setting purposes that the media influence and determine the importance of topics on the public agenda. If the media tell the public what to think about, who tells the media what to think about? In some cases, it's the public relations professional. The media don't tell the public what to think, they tell the public what to think about. Must a public relations professional be a writer? The answer is a resounding yes. Not only a writer, but a good writer. So much of communication involves the written word. The professional communicator should be able to juggle multiple priorities, communicate with and understand a broad range of audiences, and they must be committed to practicing ethically. What are the attitudinal attributes that a professional communicator must possess? They must work well under pressure, be adaptable to changing circumstances, intellectually curious and creative. They must work well individually and as a team member, be focused, diligent, and able to work effectively at the micro and macro levels. I reverse those, macro and micro levels. Be empathetic and have a strong moral compass. That concludes our Chapter 3 lecture. There is an accompanying quiz on Blackboard as well as a discussion board forum.